الحمد لك والملك لا شريك لك لبيك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Welcome our dear viewers to another Deen Love episode. I'm here today with Sayyideh and the two guys that really, this is going to be a powerful one. This is exciting, right? We have with us on my right, Brother Idrees Abu Nu'aym. How you doing, man?
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Still, I think the weather's getting better. Was it 23 today?
We'll take it.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
It's been an upgrade.
Brother Dawood, Ustad, Kayfak.
Alhamdulillah, bikhair, blessed. Alhamdulillah, everything is good.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah ta'ala. So today we have, we're going to get right into it. This episode, honestly, I think you two are probably the right people to do this episode with me. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ni'mah. And so we thank Allah Azza wa Jal because it's an experience that we all have. Okay. And I think we can speak on it and also, shed some light on the situation. And then, to kind of to relate to our community with transparency, the real deal on the ground, and not allow other people who have different motives to take and hijack this conversation. And so today we want to talk about the state of Dugsis and Madrasas. For those of you guys who don't know, our non-Somali audience that is following us, Dugsis are just madrasas. It's Islamic schools that we have for kids. Sometimes we have mahad, so it's a Islamic institute, right? So we're going to talk about those today and what is the progression that it has taken from back in the days to probably our generation to where we are today. What is the state of madrasas or duksis compared to before today? What's the situation looking like?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. The situation of madrasas or duksis, as we call them, today compared to how long ago?
Probably your generation, maybe when you were a student, because we could speak on that.
Within our community.
Yes.
Okay. A lot has changed. Not only the duksi, not only the way the duksis are going, but also the problems that the young people who go to the duksis are facing. So the problems that I was facing when I was younger and I was going to madrasa are not necessarily the same problems that youth are facing today.
Right.
So the problems have changed, yet the medicine has stayed the same.
SubhanAllah.
Yet the duksis have stayed the same.
Yeah.
And what should have happened was the duksis should have transitioned into a place where the problems of the youth of today can be solved and addressed. Naam. The biggest issue I believe that happened was there was a gap between brothers our age or a little older didn't step in and fulfill their roles. They started, going to university, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they became preoccupied with that and didn't take on this heavy responsibility of giving back to the youth and addressing the problems that they understood better than the people who addressed the problems for us, who were much older now, don't really know the problems as well as the younger generation did. So that gap that was left created a huge problem for us.
And a lot of setbacks.
And then kind of our generation, our age gap, had to go in there and try to do as much work as possible. But we still didn't have the leadership and we didn't have the centers, and we were just assisting. We were band-aiding, basically. So the problems are different. The situation in the Dugsi, the way they're run, still the same. I think that's kind of the biggest problem. When I was growing up, for instance, memorizing the Quran was a top priority.
Yeah.
It's still today a top priority.
You can say
Naam.
that. Naam.
The Islamic studies we had were taught in Somali, right? And alhamdulillah, when we were growing up, we understood Somali, we knew Somali, so we benefited as much as we could from the Islamic studies, from the ma'ads. Now they're taught in English, but now it might be a little too late, because that huge gap that was missing, we didn't have English ma'ads, you had one in the entire state.
So,
and it was
so do you think English was a vital a tool to have been
definitely
incorporated at that time?
Definitely. And I think the older generation kind of were like, no, we're gonna stick to Somali so that the culture doesn't get lost, and you had that also be a problem. So, but that's really the biggest thing, is that the Dugsis, they're operating the same way for the past 20 years. In those 20 years, we've had different youth groups come through with different problems.
Yeah.
And their problems weren't addressed, and so now they're on their own to figure out for their own.
Brother Dawood, you
Yes.
are Ustad, you are a teacher right now actively. You see a lot of the issues. You see the condition and the state of our youth, our students inside these institutions. Shed some light on contrast from the time that you were learning till now, right?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wasalam ala rasulillah. It's a very important question to put into light the differences that has happened in such a short time.
Yeah.
In maybe the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Between the way that the youth conduct themselves. It's not like we're like old dinosaurs here, but a lot has changed in that short time.
Yeah.
But that being said, I have to preface what I'm saying in the sense that, of course, I'm not like born or in the States, but Canada.
Okay.
But it's all the same, to be honest.
Yeah.
They're both Western countries, similar culture, similar whatever you want to say. It's all the same. It's oranges and apples at the end of the day. The challenges over in growing up, like the Dugsis in the Islamic madrasas, a lot of it the brothers touched upon is the upbringing in the madrasas. I think till now still predominantly, but I do feel like there's a lot of change. People are noticing the importance of that. Before it was primarily just focused on, I think what it was is the elders. They were a previous generation that grew up back home, and they just brought what they were familiar with from back home and brought that same structure here. And it worked to a degree, and it's still working now, but not as efficient.
Yeah.
It's definitely not as efficient. And maybe we were able to produce people who were able to recite the Quran very well, or who are, even here, specifically here in Minnesota, that's probably one place they really excelled.
Yeah.
I could say, they definitely produce a lot of hifdh and people who can read the Quran. But the moment we looked beyond that, in terms of what we want a madrasa or an Islamic school to represent, it's extremely lacking in a lot of categories. We all know foremost, I feel like the number one thing that was lacking, even when I was in a student, was the emphasis on understanding the religion from its cores, the aqidah, understanding like basic essentials, like the muhimmat that everyone should know, and the importance, I felt like, of focusing on simple things like intention and your akhlaq and tarbiyah. That is something that can only be done by an Islamic school. Us being in the Western system, we all know there's not going to be no tazkiyah class or akhlaq class or tarbiyah or anything like of that nature in a normal Western academic atmosphere. It's not going to exist. So the only possible place that a Muslim who's being raised in the West can learn traditional proper akhlaq of a Muslim should be in this setting. And unfortunately, يعني مع الأسف, sadly, none of the madaris, from what I know, hardly focused on that topic at hand. And I think its ugly head came out now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before it was a little too early.
Yeah.
The repercussions of not teaching people proper etiquettes and mannerisms, which is, we know, is extremely important in our deen, as we're taught from the sunnah, is the value and the scale that having good khuluq has in our religion.
Yeah.
That was completely ignored, and now it's so prominent. And you guys are all teachers as well. Is you see how bad it is, like when it comes to the mannerisms of the kids and the akhlaq. It's just, it's painful. It's so painful. It's a sad situation. But I would say that's, to put it in a nutshell, kind of what.
You know what? We're going to talk about the students specifically. We have a separate segment for them. Do you remember? Maybe Idrees remembers this. Do you remember Duksi Reform? Duksi Reform movement on Facebook and social media. I don't know if that was.
I think we should summarize it real quick.
Yeah,
because I'm a bit ignorant on that one.
So our brothers from Canada, but Duksi Reform was that something that was local here, or did it kind of?
It was local first.
Okay,
it was just an idea.
Okay, so hashtag, right?
One of the imams here started, just touching on the topic of Duksi Reform, changing the way Duksis are going.
In a positive sense?
In a positive sense, naam. Okay. Or his idea of what should change.
Like a dialogue and discussion.
This is just, he posted it on Facebook.
What was that, like 7 years ago?
No, I think so. About 5-6
years ago.
And the pushback he got, they shredded him, man. What are you saying? We produced the most hifdh, this and this, and so.
What was his main critique though? Like, what was he like going against?
It wasn't even critique. It was just the idea of, should we look at the Duksi system and change something about it? Yeah, that was literally his whole point. Okay, right? Maybe we need to, because at that point he was seeing kind of how things were going left. He saw, girls and women with their shubuhat and their doubts, men falling into their desires, and these were kids that were just either leaving the Duksi scene or they were in the midst of going to Duksi. So he's like, yo, do we need to change something? What's going on? And so he got pushed back for even thinking about.
Really? I thought the last time I remember, there was like some fruitful discussion happening. Was that later on?
With people but a lot of people were pushing back early on. Yeah, it was like pushback because and in Minnesota there are certain institutes that when you talk about these things, there's certain institutes that stand out that dominate the Duksi arena. Yeah. So
there's some pride that comes in.
So. But yeah, I remember when that was a talk.
Brother, that was just a talk. And let me tell you something. We're walking. I don't know if it's in the right direction. That's why we're here. Okay. So that was Duksi Reform. That happened. And now we're here. Okay. There's the biggest critique that I think that has been echoed is the lack of Islamic studies. Oh, yeah. That's one. And two, it was very difficult moving from the Somali language to the English. That was a very tough transition. Even now in many transition. Yeah, there's many madaris, they're like, yeah, we're not doing that still, because we want our kids to learn the language. And so this is just a question that just came to me right now. How important do you think is to preserve the Somali language or any language? It could be Urdu, if there's madrasas, that are happening, or Farsi, or Arabic. Well, Arabic has to stay if you got it. But this struggle of keeping the Somali music, the struggle of keeping the Somali language a part of these institutions. Do you think it's worth it?
Before I answer that question, there was the idea of, or what happened. Why did English not become, it wasn't necessarily even to keep Somali a dominant language. What happened was around 2009, 2010, you had some older guys who finished Ma'ad. They were actually good students of knowledge. I remember them, name on a name
Okay.
basis, first name basis. They were doing good. They were very solid students of knowledge. Yani that could teach the next generation.
Yeah.
They knew English, some of them. What happened was, akhi wallahi, they were pushed to the hustle. Getting a job, getting a degree.
Dang.
That stuff in their eyes was more important than teaching the next generation. And I don't blame them. They weren't given
Yeah.
the platform. They
Yeah.
weren't made the
Okay,
stars of our
that's
community.
a good point.
Nah,
I think we should touch upon that.
Right?
Yeah, we gotta
They
talk
weren't.
about
They
that.
weren't given the platform. They weren't given the superstardom they deserved. The
And
same
even,
way.
but even also the socioeconomic situation with their families.
Nah,
You know, they're probably relatively new here.
Nah.
They're first
they
generation.
got family back home.
So they gotta, you know,
Yep.
they gotta carry
Yep.
the entire family and the
Yep.
extension.
They gotta work multiple jobs. They gotta go to college. So that left that gap of, now we had us growing up, and wallahi, even when I was growing up and I was going to Dugsi, it was rare to find a kid that understood an entire Somali lecture,
Wow.
right? So a lot of these kids were, you know, they could understand it, but they couldn't really deeply understand
Yeah.
it, where they were actually knowing what's going on. That happened, and you can see guys are losing interest in the religion, because now it's just like, whatever, this is rubbish,
Yeah.
whatever, I'm just gonna do my 2 hours here. And that's something else also, was the fact that it was 2 hours, or it was 4 or 5 hours Saturday, 4 or 5 hours Sunday, Monday through Friday he's going to school, the gym, he has all these other things going on. He comes to school for 5-6 hours max
Yeah.
a day, 12 hours a weekend times 4. I mean, the hours don't even match up
Yeah.
of him putting in the effort in school. And so for us to be shocked is actually wrong. We shouldn't be shocked in terms of, but like, you know, going back to the question of,
Is it worth
is
it
it worth to
to fight for the Somali
language? I mean, there's to fight for it in educational settings. It doesn't make sense, especially when parents at home don't speak Somali to their kids. If you can't, the most important institution is the family. If the family is not keeping Somali alive, the Duksi is not going to do it.
That's true.
So don't try to fight and put all this effort into doing it at Dugsi for 2 hours if the parents are speaking English to their kids.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, is that kids weren't speaking, their parents were not speaking their Somali to their kids, and the kids lost it. And
Yeah.
now teachers here, 30, 40-year-old teachers are talking about, I'm teaching this. And wallah, I remember a teacher, he had a class of about 6th, 7th, 8th graders. The kids were like, we don't know what this guy's talking about.
Wow.
He's teaching Islamic studies. Very good Quran teacher. Islamic studies, he only teaches in Somali. The administration told him, Sheikh, we're going to have Ma'alin come in, teach the kids in Islamic studies in English so they can understand. He said, no. I'm going to teach in Somali. If they understand, it's up to them. If they don't, it's up to them.
SubhanAllah.
Wallahi, this happened. This is a true story. Yani I don't know if it was pride. I don't know if he's thinking of, I got to teach them Somali. That's a lack of wisdom. You can't teach kids in
it's
Somali.
time and place.
The
Nah.
hikmah's not there.
And so these kids had to endure the pain of listening to a guy talk for an hour of a language they had no idea what he was saying.
And then also keep in mind the desires and the shahwa outside
Subhanallah,
are
subhanallah.
screaming their names.
And all these kids, they just want their questions answered,
That's it.
right? Most of the Islamic studies that we do is answering questions.
No, that's actually a really good
and then
point.
kids take a step back and they're like, okay, that makes sense now.
No, like this reflection is much needed, because sometimes people, they go on the opposite extremes and they attack or they defend fully. And I think that's a mistake,
Yeah.
because you have to really reflect on the bigger picture,
whole
see
picture.
what's going on here.
Yeah.
Look at all of the, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Brother Dawood, what would you like to highlight and touch upon?
There's one thing I would want to highlight on, and the brother mentioned one thing about the dedication to the time that is given to the Duksis. I feel like, for me, my madrasa environment, even though mine was not predominantly Somali back in Canada, it was predominantly, you could say, Indo-Pak, right? Desi community. And mashallah, they have some attributes I respect about the way they run it. They're very, how would I say, very disciplined.
Yeah.
They're very, they have a structure in place. When I'm talking about management side, they don't, so that kind of, and also they don't have this kind of soft approach. I feel like some of the Somalis out here have adopted. You're probably like, what is this guy talking about? It's
Okay,
depends.
I'm gonna let
I'm
you-
specific. I'm gonna be specific though.
Okay, okay.
I'll break it down more
No.
specifically. Number one thing I feel like is the time we used to have a Monday to Friday schedule. Monday to Friday, after school, the whole week. So it would be like, you could say 5 to 7:30, Monday to Friday, right? It is a commitment from the parents' side because they take the kids from school. You got work, blah blah. I know it's very heavy on the schedule, but if you have a Monday to Friday consistent schedule when it comes to your madrasa, is far more better than the weekend, right? Give them a weekend off, no problem. No. But the Monday to Friday, if you have a Monday to Friday schedule, I feel like it's better. On top of that, the Islamic studies, that wasn't there. That's just a thing that's lacking all around in all the madaris. The Islamic studies is everything. I swear to God, is everything. But the challenge is, at least with the Somali community, is getting the parents to understand Quran Hifdh is not the objective here.
I know exactly what you're talking
Barakallahu
about.
fihim. They love Quran Hifdh, predominantly in the Somali culture. It's all they know. When it comes to Duksi, is Hingad, Quran, Kabah, Ashaka, Kabah, go home. And it's just something that I'm not going to lie to you, since I came to Minnesota, I've been at war with. When it comes to يعني giving them قناعة وخاصة والدين تنا فهم, so you understand that the number one objective here when you send your kids to madaris, especially when they reach a certain age, they need Islamic studies. They need it more than to memorize the Quran. I'm sorry to tell you, Quran Hifdh is a fadl, يعني it has a virtue. But let's be honest, we all know the Deen, it is not wajib. ليس بواجب. It's absolutely not obligation. But an obligation is to know your iman, to know your aqidah, to know how to make wudu, how to make salah, your basics of your religion. That is actually an obligation that is fard upon your children to learn, and it's a wajib upon the parents to teach them, and that's on their throats. So the mentality is the number one requirement is that change needs to take place more than anything else, ikhwan. Those are the two key things that I feel like the schedule needs to be serious. The same way that you guys are sending your kids to basketball camps or Monday to Friday sending them to school, you got to bring that same energy to teaching them their religion. And I feel like that's one of the critiques I would probably say to the current system that's in place. Yeah.
I mean, nasallallahu al-afiyah. I think we gotta talk about parents for a second.
That's a huge one.
We gotta talk about parents for a second because I know exactly what Brother Dawood is talking about. I literally had one parent say to me, she said, there was a mom, and she was like, "Oh well," because this is Islamic studies. This is an Islamic institute where the primary focus is not Hifdh al-Quran. And so we're teaching them Islamic studies, and she's like, "Oh, but how about the Quran though? He needs to do like a maraja of all of these ajza, and needs to memorize all of them." And so she said to me, "No, it's okay. If once he memorizes all the Quran, then fiqh and everything will just come to him." Yeah. And I'm like, "Was this wahi? Was this a revelation? He's gonna get it. When is this ever? This is the mindset." And I think partially is because parents use their kids as a stepping stool to paradise. And I think that's what they're thinking about. It's
just fame. Just fame.
Or straight up fame.
That's
what it is.
You're thinking good.
Let's not even filter it, bro. I would say straight up fame. Quran competitions.
Yeah. You're thinking good about Uthman.
Toyota Highlander.
That's something too,
But
let's be honest. For Quran competition, you gotta have a good voice.
This brother did not have big time.
So he just didn't have it. But that's the thing. It's like they're like, okay, at the expense of the kids not knowing the Islamic studies, Islamic education on just basic fiqh aqidah, that they would sacrifice all their time for them to memorize the Quran. They don't know what one verse of it means.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
And it's a beautiful thing to memorize the Quran. Don't get us wrong. Even if you don't know the meaning, for sure, there's fadl in it. Alhamdulillah. However, there is something called precedence. And right now, when your kids don't know how to pray, what are you over here trying to make them memorize the Quran for?
Mm-hmm.
Wallahi, the fact they know, even if they know one juz, that's good enough. Wallahi, today, if they know just one juz, that's good enough. And it's plus his ma'na. So, Brother Idrees, talk about the barrier of the parents. Because there are some good parents. We're not going to,
disparage all of them.
Yeah, it's not all parents. But there are some parents who I don't know if their brains are screwed on right. And, I just try to be.
They're just in a different world, Akhi.
They're in a different
world, let's put it that way.
Idrees, have you experienced this?
Yeah, definitely. But I also think a good teacher can make up for a bad parent.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yes.
If the kid is, if you see that the kid has potential, and that his parents are holding him back, you could kind of talk to the kid. And I remember one parent that was, all she cared about was like telling this kid to cut his hair. Man, can you convince him to cut his hair?
Yeah.
Right, I'm trying to work with this kid, teaching him the basics of Islam. She's telling me, can you have him cut his hair? And I told her eventually, inshallah, he'll cut his hair. Once he realizes the significance of the importance of how he should look and how a student of knowledge should look, because he's a student of knowledge. He wants to be a student of knowledge. He wants to be a sheikh. These are the things he's saying. Eventually, when he learns how they look and how they carry themselves, he'll do it, inshallah.
He'll do it.
And he did it at the end. So, a lot of parents are focused on things that, like you said, bro, it's either for fame.
Yeah.
I want him to memorize the Quran so he can be in these competitions, so I can put him on Facebook. And social media is the biggest problem. Especially for the older generation, because they abuse it, akhi. They abuse it like it's nothing. They share false information, like your uncle will send you or your auntie will send you a hadith. You could tell this doesn't sound like the Prophet. This was said by somebody next door. No way.
These WhatsApp groups of parents, man.
They don't check nothing. So social media has gotten to them, right? And it's sad when you see older people acting like little. That's what social media does. It does. It doesn't. There's no. You can't tell who's who. Like a 15-year-old and a 50-year-old will post the same thing.
SubhanAllah.
Right. And so if parents didn't care about that and actually worked with the teachers one-on-one on what's good for their kids and really worried about what's going on in their kids' lives and the problems they're facing at school, they don't know that their kids are being harassed or abused or their kids are going through doubts of atheism. You know how many parents didn't even know their kids were having atheist doubts, and this mom is talking about she doesn't wear the hijab.
Yeah.
Did you know your daughter is an atheist? Unless and she won't even believe you.
Yeah.
Parents could definitely be a barrier, man. But I think a good teacher could also, in some ways, make up for a bad parent.
No, I think we have to give credit though to even sometimes the hard-headed parents. At least they bring their kids somewhere to learn.
Like in the problems you mentioned, subhanallah, so many problems. The madrasa is supposed to be a place, was supposed to be a place, should be a place now. Whatever happened in the past happened. Like, it should be a place now where
that's true.
The problems of the community are dealt with.
No.
Every city has a city council where the city leaders come together and the people tell them their problems and they try to fix the problems. I don't know if there's ever been a Dugsi meeting. I don't know if there's ever been, parents that come to these meetings and they tell teachers their parents. They tell their problems to the administration. This is what we're dealing with. This is what our kids are seeing. What can you guys do about this? There's no accountability also in our community. That's something I noticed.
That's true.
The leaders are the leaders, the followers are the followers.
That's it.
There's no expectations from the leaders. No, there's no expectations from the followers. So the madrasa should be that. Is more that important.
Yeah.
With all the problems that we have today.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, and I think, we're discussing this angle about the parents. It's a teamwork job that we can't just allow the parents can't do it on their own, and the teachers can't do it on their own either, right? Because there's an issue sometimes parents treat these institutions like daycare, and they don't care. And then there is another issue where sometimes parents try to be the teachers at the same time you're teaching, and say, "Oh no, don't teach him that. Teach him this." And so I know this because this is what I was taught, and then he doesn't need to know that. He needs to learn this. It's like, okay, you brought them to me, so let me do my job. So you have that issue as well, brother Dawood, Ustad Dawood. Naam.
Yes, I wanted to touch upon that point. You brought it up, akhi, in true introduction. There's a problem, number one, with the parents thinking that they know what's best for their kids in terms of what they should learn in terms of Islamic knowledge and Quran, when they do not have a clue in multiple levels.
Yeah.
Multiple levels. They don't understand the children, their challenges that they're facing in the current society that they're living in. They don't know what's priority for them to learn Islamically. Both ways, they're ill-equipped to decide what is right for the teacher to teach the kids. So one thing they need to learn as parents is just take your hands out of the situation and let those who understand the society that your child is living in and grew up in it, and those who learn the Deen and who know that what should be the priority for your children to learn, let them take hold of the situation in that classroom and let them decide what is right. Because I've had situations here in Minnesota. I had a classroom when I first came here. It was a duksi, it was traditional duksi. It was Quran. They were teaching Quran, and I came into the classroom, and these kids were, I'd say most of them were teenagers, right? They're 15, 16, 14 years old. And when I came into the classroom, first few weeks, I picked up one thing. The kids, they can't read the Quran properly. Like 90% of them.
Wow.
They don't know Quran properly. They can't read with proper ahkam, with tajweed. Whatever Quran hifdh they do, I say quote unquote hifdh, because the reality is you'll see the kid in Surah Al-An'am, you ask him to read lam yakun alladhina kafaru, doesn't know it. So I don't call that Quran hifdh.
Subhanallah.
That's mag'a. It's just hifdh by name. It's not reality. So they're not benefiting in terms of the learning how to recite the Quran correctly.
Yes.
Okay. So they don't know how to read the Quran correctly. So let alone memorizing. And even if they did memorize, which they hadn't, you have memorized incorrectly. So whatever they were doing was an absolutely failed mission. It's a failed classroom because they didn't memorize the Quran correctly. They don't know how to read correctly, which is the minimum mission, is for them to learn how to read Kitabillah. When they know how to read Kitabillah, alhamdulillah, you left them with something. But they don't know how to read Kitabillah properly. You say, my. And then you have the teachers come in, and you have the parents come in. He got this. Well, he'll finish when he knows how to read correctly. Right? Because what happens is you have situations where I'm sure previous predecessors before me were pressured and they felt obliged to satisfy a quote-unquote customer and push them into the Quran when they're not ready for the Quran. Right. So there's a problem there. Then you have the situation where, what I was mentioning earlier, you have 14, 15-year-olds who do not know the Quran, who have no tarbiyah, no mannerism, no akhlaq, no deen, no aqidah, no nothing. Completely jahil, ignorant about their religion. So what I did, I stepped into that classroom and I said, you know what? I went to the management. I said, I'm not going to teach this classroom for Quran anymore. Right? This is my ultimatum. I'm going to teach primarily, we have a 4-hour class. 3 hours is going to be dedicated to Islamic studies. SubhanAllah. Right? The last hour, if any parent has a quarrel with me, we'll satisfy them and say, we'll help them with the Quran in this last hour. But the first 3 hours is going to be dedicated to Islamic studies. Right away, there was a riot. Parents, no, we don't want this, marabno, blah, 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 blah. Some parents, with some convincing, they were able to understand. Some parents outright pulled out of the class and said, I want my child to be in the other classroom. I said, faddal, no problem. Which shows to me that those parents are ignorant of the situation. Yes, they completely lost. They don't know what they're doing. So this needs to change. This is a big problem.
This is an issue. We're going to move on to the students next. But just, also consider the Islamic education of the parents themselves. Yeah. So when you're not educated, you don't have value. You don't see it. You don't value that thing, right? To you, it's just another obstacle in the way. And then so some of them, they think, oh, well, they're just trying to take more money out of us, and they're just trying to make the process longer. And so, they want Quran. Guess what? Your child is probably not a Muslim. And we're not thinking about these situations, which are really dire. And so now we're going to move on to the students themselves. But go ahead.
I was gonna quick advice to parents.
It's very important. I don't mind that we're taking our time.
I don't know.
I don't know if parents are gonna listen.
I don't know if they're going to listen.
Nah,
Yeah,
man,
they'll listen to you. You're a Buddha.
Like anybody that's listening that's gonna become a parent.
Yeah.
The most important thing you could do for your child is have them reach their full potential. As a parent, you have to put your kids with people that know what they're doing. For instance, Quran. If you want your kids to excel in Quran, put them in the best Quran classes. If you want your kids to excel in Islamic studies, put them with the best Islamic teachers.
Yeah.
Keep your kids busy with knowledge and even sports. If you're gonna put them into sports, a lot of parents, they let a lot of these guys stay home all day.
Yeah.
Playing video games. Right? And then a guy is 16 and he doesn't know if he's a man or a woman.
It's a killer.
Right? This whole time he's been playing video games, eating ice cream, 10 pounds of ice cream a week, and now he doesn't know whether he's... So put your kids out there, especially your sons. Put them out there, invest in their education and their fitness and everything, and keep them busy.
Yeah.
Keep them busy. Eventually that kid is going to find his way. Like when you over here trying to protect them and think you know what you're doing and that you know best, when you in reality don't even know, there's a chance you don't know the religion yourself.
Yeah, you need to take these classes. Yeah, it's true. And I think now it's a good time to segue to the students. I teach brothers and sisters. Have you taught sisters, idrees?
No.
And then Dawood?
Yes.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So now let's talk about it, because this is a new breed. These guys are not the same as what we were growing up with.
Yeah.
And so let's get into it. I mean, let's get into the attitude of the students themselves, okay? Because sometimes there may be some good parents, but the child is unruly, and the child is they're ungrateful, and they think they know better. So let's get into the students. I know all of us, we've taught brothers and sisters. Hey, Ustad Dawood, talk to us about your experience with today's modern day Muslim
Students.
Youth. Let's talk about it now.
Okay, well, let's just say is a different breed, like you said. Is a different breed, and they present their own challenges that are unique. And as a teacher, in a classroom, you have to have extreme patience, because you have these students who are just coming from different households, who have different levels of discipline, different levels of respect, that are going to be in your class. But you have challenges from the boys, and you have challenges from the girls.
Okay.
All right? I like to divide.
No, you have to. Lazim.
Because they have two different attitude, characteristics, behavior, problems.
Interests.
And interests as well. So with the boys, there's just, what can I say? Okay, I struggle with one thing, getting them to understand dress, right? I feel like in our community, the Somali community, I think we do a good job of instilling at least to the young girls how they should dress.
Yeah.
But we don't do that enough of that when it comes to our boys, right? You got these kids coming in every time, with these ugly, the trashy, unkept hair, just not looking presentable, not coming to class the way you should come, not wearing proper clothes, some of them wearing pajamas, Crocs. Like, what are you doing? Who told you this was acceptable dress for a Muslim man? That's first of all one thing, because we all know when it comes to madrasa, essentially what you're saying is this is talab al-ilm. This is seeking knowledge.
Yeah.
You have students who are seeking knowledge of Islam, and we all know the importance of how you come to the classroom in terms of your presentation, how you look, how you talk, how you address your teacher, how you go about things is extremely important, right? And people can refer back to the stories of the Salaf in this regard. But my point being is the boys, they come to class not in a proper dress. They show up in the classroom they tend to have lack of respect for the elders in front of them. Yani, talking, disruptive. And some of them, subhanAllah, you're thinking, this is like a 17-year-old, he's throwing paper airplanes in the classroom. Like, there's such a lack of maturity when it comes to the boys.
And just entitlement.
And just, they're too privileged. They're too cuddled. Like, I'm being blunt. When it comes to the Somali community, this is what I feel is when it comes to the younger boys. They're a little too cuddled. They need more discipline. They need more discipline. Too soft. Too privileged. And they could just think they could run around and make a muck in the class and just never do any of their assignments. Like when it comes to Islamic studies, the amount of them that do assignments, is really low. Handwriting is unreadable. You have to bring the CIA to come and try to interpret what they wrote. And they're 16, 17 years old.
Hieroglyphics.
Egyptian
walls. You got to decipher.
Get headache to try to decipher what they're writing. And these are going to college. I'm like, la ilaha illallah. May Allah help us. Yeah. So that's the situation with the boys, to say the least.
So I've realized that there's been some really disheartening realities with the young brothers. Okay, but don't worry, we sisters, we got something for y'all too, but we're dealing with the brothers first. And it's just this laziness, just this sloth culture of just dragging your feet, and then the hoodies, and then just pulling the hoodies and walking around this, and with the hair still like it's nappy, and the Nike Techs. And just the Crocs, the sweatpants, the pajamas, the eye boogers in the eyes, and just can I go to the bathroom? It's like the most just the kids when you get to like Hengadi, like you have like 5, 6. I mean, you can expect some sort of behavior, but you're like 17, brother, 16. You're 18 years old, and your hair, like one kid's hair, it looks so disgusting that I don't think scissors or any type of cutter can get through his head. Wallahi, I don't think any of it could. Right?
Just scrub.
And what's interesting too is, like, I'm sorry, but they made me like a pro parent position of just, I'm so fixated on hair now, because what I realized is the kids with the terrible hair happen to always be like the problematic students. The kids with the terrible hair happen to be the problematic students, and just, bear, at least, to say the least, just lazy, just not doing anything, non-productive, right? They don't work out, nothing, just skinny guys, and they have these phones that weigh more than their palms, and they're flipping through it during break time. It's just the saddest thing to see, man. I don't know whether to ask for humanitarian aid or it's just really sad, because at least in our generation, the brothers were a little more, it's like if they got in trouble, at least it was like they were active. They were going outside. That's another issue too, is what you guys were mentioning, is that these kids are indoors. They don't see the world. And the world to them is a Call of Duty game and Fortnite game for hours at a time, sitting on these fancy chairs that they think are thrones. And it's so sad because they don't know the reality outside. Somebody's picking on their sister at school, and the guy doesn't even know what to do. He pulls out his camera, the phone starts recording, and his sister is fighting the guy. This is the production today of our young brothers. Now, of course, not all of them, because there are some exceptionally good students who they have good tarbiyah and they have good environments that are there around. But I mean, all in all, I think it's safe to say the majority, and when I say majority, 51% or more of young brothers today fall under the descriptions I just gave you. Brother Idrees, What's your experience with brothers? Young brothers.
So I taught mostly brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I taught sisters Islamic studies, but for the most part, I taught young men. And I was always put in a class that was usually they had the same characteristics you mentioned. They're younger guys that don't really want to be at Dugsi. Most of them. There's some who do want to be there. So obviously the way I approached it, I'm not going in there as a teacher first. I gotta first see what's going on. A lot of the young guys, first of all, something we mentioned was a lot of these people we're talking about, they're in our generation.
Yes.
We're talking years.
Okay. But
their attitude, their behaviors, their characteristics are so different.
Yes.
We think they're from another generation. They're our generation, but nowadays we categorize generation based off of how they act and how they do things, right?
That's more accurate.
Right? Yeah. Not just because we're in the same 25-year mark and whatnot, but a lot of these kids are different, man. You know, and that has a lot to do with the problems they're facing. But as a teacher, one thing I did was I focused on the good students, the students that wanted to be there, the kids that wanted to learn. No matter, one thing I told kids was, man, I don't care how many, how many weeks you don't pass Ashra or months, or how terrible your Arabic is, or you don't memorize anything. If your akhlaq is good with me, you're going to be one of my favorite students. And I don't care how many pages you memorize. If your akhlaq is bad, you're not going to be in my class. I don't want you in my class because you're a cancer to the rest of the guys. So I had to find the cancer in the class. Damn. Once I found the cancer and I cut it out, and I just and I tried to work with them. But when you see a young man with arrogance, which is, you find the iblis of the class, and you see he thinks he's better than everybody. He thinks he's better than the knowledge you're teaching him. He thinks he's better than you. It's better to just kick him out of your class.
It's too far gone.
Too far gone. Yeah. Let his parents and administration find something better. But I'm not going to risk the 17, 18, 20 other kids who have potential. So once you kick out the cancer, you realize the other kids that you thought were bad kids were just followers.
Yes. And
so now they're following the good kids now. When you make the good kids the leaders of the class, those kids start to swarm around the good kids. And so I gave rewards. I rewarded the good kids who were good in their akhlaq. Some kids, we had a kid who was the best in Quran by far. We had a different kid who was the best in Islamic studies. Yeah. And then we had a kid who was good in akhlaq. 3 different students.
That's great.
But they're all in the same classroom. They all have things that they're good at.
Yeah.
And they can all learn from each other. The guy in the Quran can be like, okay, I need to work on my adab and akhlaq. The guy with the good akhlaq can learn from the guy that has the good qira'at and knows the Quran. And so, and we also, it was a modern class. We had field trips. Every 3 months we went out to went out to field trips. Yeah, man, because these kids, that's the life they grow up in.
No, you gotta take them out, right? You gotta take them out, and
they
explore the
just
world.
A simple day at basketball makes you the best ma'alin ever. I took him to basketball court one time. Wallahi, you're the best ma'alin ever. And I gave him some Little Caesar pizza, not even Domino's.
Yeah,
right. And they thought I was the best teacher ever because of those little things. But that takes somebody that grew up in the system, that knows it, that kind of knows what these kids want, what these kids like, how do you get to these kids. And wallahi, a lot of those students they become little brothers to you. Not only students, but they actually hit you up on the side. They hit you up on weekends. Hey, what are we doing today? Is there halaqah here? And so you realize you actually start to build this community outside of Dugsi, which is the most important thing. When I was growing up, I only knew my ma'alin Saturday, Sunday between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. Or whenever I went to Dugsi. I didn't know this guy. I don't know what this guy did Monday through Friday. I've never seen him Monday through Friday.
Never try to see him.
Never try to see him. Saturday, Sunday only. So when you try to build a relationship with these kids outside of Dugsi, that adds on to that. Now you can impact their life. Yeah. On a higher
That's a very
level.
Good point.
Yeah. No, I think this is important too, to recognize people that have different potentials and traits. It's also important. Not everybody's going to be good at Quran. It's just not, You
might have a faqih.
Exactly. Yeah. Quran just may not be the thing for everybody in the class. So once you boil just your standards to just Quran,
you're missing out.
You're gonna probably damage and cripple some kids for life. because you're making them think like, oh, you guys are nothing, right? And so that's another issue too. I love to bring up just the like modern day issues and problems. I bring them to the class and we have a discussion on it based off of tazkiyah or whatever it is, the waqi'ah, and the kids are really in tune to it. They are engaged, and it helps a lot for them to understand, because these are the real questions they have. These are the things they have questions about. They don't have a question about Qul Huwallahu Ahad. They don't have questions about that. They have a question about, can I kill my kids? Can I have abortions? Right? I saw on this one Islamic paper that you can, and so these are the questions that they have. These are the topics I think we need to start focusing on, right? And especially when they're outside of the school, talk to them about the consequences of going down a lifestyle where the high school system is screaming at you. You're in shahwat. It's everything. Hawa, everything is around you. Women, girls want to be noticed by boys, so they start doing things, makeup, nails, and they start to get these nose piercings, double side, septum ring, bow ring, and everything. And they say, well, I'm doing it for myself. And, so the hijab starts to go back a little bit more here, and then it goes further and further. Every grade, from freshman, by the time she's a senior, she has no sort of khimar on. This is the point here that we need to hone in on this, because they think you can behave this way and still be a good Muslim. They're like, well, it's about your heart and what's inside your heart. And so it's like, wallahi, they don't understand that. So when you break down those tazkiyah points to them, I've seen people, some of my best students are sisters. Some of my best students that I've ever taught are sisters, bro. It's not the brothers. It's the sisters, right? And I'm talking about like transition and transformation 180. I've seen it. From fighting with me in class, like arguing with me and creating like rebellions against me, from being like top of the student, A+. She's getting A's in the class, and not to mention all the struggles that she's going through outside in her home. And sometimes that's another thing too, is that the parents are obstacles for kids in doing better Islamically, which is ironic. You see what I'm saying? And so these are things. So I mean, the sisters really, they have problems with social media more than brothers do. Yeah. That's their issues. It's like they want to live this double life sometimes, and so they think like, oh, I'm just going to do, and you can see it sometimes. They bring it out in some of the discussions and points they make in class, that, what types of things they're delving in back at home, right? So talk to us about the sisters, your sister students. What do you think are like the big issues? I know hijab is a big one on the menu.
That's today. Always.
Hijab is a big one on the menu. Like if they don't get it by like 14, bro, it's going to be really hard to convince them afterwards.
By 3. By 3.
Oh, the Somali community is changing. Wallah, it's changing. Yeah.
It's changing for sure. And I would love to touch upon a few of the positives that I've seen from teaching, the sisters first, before I just touch upon the other stuff. The thing is, when it comes to the girls, when it comes to their education, I mean, for the most part, they tend to take it more seriously.
Yes.
And this transfers into the Duksi classroom or the Islamic studies. They tend to, Walillah alhamd, have good handwriting, tend to know classroom etiquette, tend to do the homework assignments that they're given. They tend to have all these characteristics, and they take their tests seriously. Participation. I feel like they have a more stronger urge to learn. And I feel like a lot of the issues that the young sisters deal with in our community and in the Western society at large, when it comes to the Muslims, a lot of it stems from ignorance.
Yes.
And constantly being left behind in the Islamic scene. So as much as we critique our sisters at times, I wanted to put that out there, is that more knowledge needs to be given to them as well, in terms of the halaqat and the Islamic studies classes at large need to be focused and tailored towards some of the shubuhat that you're mentioning, and the doubts that the problems of hijab, the problems of abortions, the problem of just the typical in the Western feminist theme that goes towards the woman.
And then the most important thing is relevance. You have to make it relevant.
Yes.
If you don't make any of these concepts they're learning of fiqh and
you have to make it relevant.
And tazkiyah,
you have to just water it down.
If you just make it, if you just teach them from a book and principles. You keep everything in a book,
it doesn't hit.
It's gonna go in one ear out the other. They're not gonna take it, bro. 100%. They're not. But I have seen some of the most, wonderful students by doing these tips that you're talking about, by implementing them in class. Amazing. And so one of the issues too is you have to adapt as a teacher, because there's no discipline. There's no disciplinary action you can take as used to be done on, us, used to have a corporal punishment. So you don't have that anymore.
It's gone.
In fact, it's the opposite. You can't touch the kids. Right? So this brings out a little, some brave kids to, and talk back to you, right? And so you have to be innovative. And you have to be, you have to improvise and say, okay, how do I control the class? It's a very difficult thing to do. Because I seen the thing I noticed is sisters, for the most part, I've seen that sisters in the class have a hard time getting on board with female teachers. It's something that I pushed for a long time, and I was like, you know what? We need to have more female teachers. That's going to fix the situation. Wallahi, they don't want female teachers.
It's not the first time
I remember at the end of the class of the semester, we're like, okay, you guys are going to have some, inshallah, some female teachers are going to come, some sisters, and they're going to teach you guys, and so we're going to separate them. They said, no, like, we want you. We don't want, no, please, no, they don't. And I was like, what's wrong? It's like, no, we don't want them. We don't want them. And so, and then I've noticed that the sisters really struggle in kind of keeping that class together, right?
Why is that?
I think they underestimate the sisters. I think the female teachers underestimate the sisters, and they think like, oh, we're friends, we're gonna get along well.
I was gonna say, could it also be that they're not delicate with, like, as a male teacher, when you're dealing with female students, you're more like,
that's true. You're gonna be delicate too. Yes,
and so as men, you'll tell them, bro, you stink, you need to take a shower. Right?
So that's the thing too.
You're more delicate.
I agree, and so what female teachers tend to be more pushovers.
Nah.
And so if she doesn't say like, yo, put her foot down, it's like, hey, if she
that's what she thinks. That's what she thinks works for. I've taught some sisters, and it was very easy to teach the sisters class. Hey sisters, let's be quiet now. We're gonna.
That's it.
And it was so easy.
Straightforward. And you got to be blunt with them. Because if you're like, hey, guys, I'm over here. All right, I'll let you guys talk some more. They will not. They're not getting. But once you're like, hey, all right, everybody, sisters, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so you can control the class, and so they respect authority. They respect authority, but it works out better because then you're able to teach the class. When you're able to teach the class, then they get to benefit off of those thamarat, and then they start to see like, wow, actually there is something in Islam for me. And I remember teaching, and we were talking about atheism, and I showed them a video about how dumb atheists are. They're like, oh my God, these guys are stupid. What? And so their iman boosted, brother. It was amazing. And like from then on out, it was like the class the projection of the class was just, they were more participating, they were more in tune to it. And so that's what they have to see, is that kufr is stupid. Shirk is dumb, right? And Islam and Tawheed, what you guys have, is amazing. It gets you through life, right? It helps you with your problems. And you should be grateful for it. Because it preserves our communities. Yeah.
I have one question. I don't know if we're going to finish off, but I had one question before we started. And I know some people might, in the comments go against our idea that memorizing the Quran
Sure.
is not, shouldn't be top priority. And
I'm ready for it.
the question I would ask is for everybody: what was the method of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba in terms of the Quran?
Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad.
Were they memorizing the Quran 10 juices a month, 30? What was there was a specific, a very clear route
Yeah.
to how to learn the Quran, take it and memorize it. And so I think that's something that we need to cover.
So what's Ustad Dawood? What is the manhaj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
You know
when
that
he's teaching the Sahaba.
the way of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and the way they learned from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is, many people may be shocked, but many of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were not hufad of the Quran. Many of them didn't even memorize the Quran, but they represented and exemplified what the Quran was meant to be in terms of application when it came to their everyday life. We are on the exact polar opposite. Exact polar opposite. Ya akhi, you'll see a guy, mashallah, he's reading Quran, tears are going to come out of your eyes. Mashallah, qira'atu jamila, he's reading with some next level maqamat stuff. Mashallah. You know what I mean? But then when you see the same brother in the basketball court, you see him walking around, you're like, is that the same brother?
That's the same guy, brother.
That's the same guy that was just reading the Quran like that program that day?
That's the same brother.
It's the same brother. It's something else, you know what I mean? So that shows you the divide in terms of our manhaj. The manhaj is, what we need to do is, and I feel like the madaris, this needs to be more entwined, is that you learn as a group. Right? This may be a complete radical change, but learn as a group. Whether it be 10 ayat or 10 lines or one page. And that one page, you dedicate into learning it correctly, reciting it correctly, and learning its meaning and deriving lessons from it.
And applying
it. I think that would be way exponentially times more effective for the students, and will be, the word that you used, something that is like, what do you say, more relatable or relevant. Something more that's way more relevant.
You know what's crazy about that is that it's not a radical idea, because let's say you did 10 a day, 10 verses a day, 365 days a year, that's 3,650 verses. That's half the Quran. In 1 year you would have went through the interpretation, the meaning, and the application of half the Quran.
That's amazing.
There's people that will not do that in the 60 years they live. They will never do that.
Never do that in their life.
Not even one verse. Naam. So for us to say it's a radical idea, it's actually not, because it's something that can actually be done.
It can be done 100%.
Easily. Now, I mean, a lot of kids would actually enjoy that. It doesn't have to be that you're stuck on those 10 verses. You learn the 10 verses, you go over it, you move on to the next 10, and you move on to the next 10. And so if somebody has that ability to memorize 10 verses, they can do it. So in 2 years, they would have memorized the Quran and known the meaning of it and known when the verses came down and applied these. Subhanallah. What kind of community will we have then?
Oh,
worlds
very
apart.
Powerful, man. And I think that's what it is. The application of the Quran is missing, right? As there was one of the righteous men from the early communities, Ibrahim ibn Adham, and he mentions these lines of, he's admonishing the community at his time, and he's from the Salaf. He says, قرأتم القرآن فلم تعلموا به فلم تعملوا به. Right? You read the Quran, but you don't act upon it. Right? You say that you love the Sunnah, and you don't act upon it. And that's at his time. And this is how we are today, is that we have in our communities a lack of application, and it's significant. We don't make significant and big in the eyes of the young, the students, or even just anybody in the community, the application of the Quran, living by the Quran itself.
That's true, Ahlul Quran.
And so, Ahlul Quran.
You hear that quoted a lot. Ahlul Quran.
And so, Ahlul Quran. So, sisters should know the Quran, and they should be living the Quran. Don't talk to me about having a turban and say that you memorize all the Quran, because you're not living the Quran. It doesn't matter if you memorized it. You see? So the Quran is going to either be for you or against you. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, he made dua to Allah. He said, Allahumma ja'al Quran hujjatan lana wa la taj'al hujjatan alayna. Oh Allah, make the Quran a proof for us on the day of judgment. Don't make it a proof against us. And the Quran is going to be a proof against a lot of people. Wa'iyadu billah. And we ask Allah for His protection.
Amen.
But this is the situation here that we have. Teaching just one verse a day and the meaning of that verse is so much more beneficial. And this is our community. We're on like this fast track thing. We want to get everything done yesterday. Right? Oh no, you have to memorize the Quran, because if you don't memorize the Quran, it's like, okay, your son memorized the Quran and he's a gang member.
Yep.
Your son memorized the Quran and he's look at his Instagram stories, and he's with a chain on, and look at him at weddings and dancing and singing songs with sisters and traveling the world with sisters. Right? No sort of shame, no haya. These are wallahi, when you travel the length and depth of this community, you will see that the biggest problem that we have is a lack of understanding. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, when Allah wants man yuridillah bihi khayran yufaqihu fi Deen, he says he gives him understanding of this religion, not understanding of not memorization of the Quran or memorization of mutun or memorization of kada wa kada, but understanding of the religion. And you know how empowering it is to know what Islam is? It's so empowering. And I always tell brothers and sisters that when I teach them, listen, you're complaining about all this stuff and these people are taking advantage of those and that. Guess what? When you don't understand the religion, people will take advantage of you. The most empowering thing that you'll ever be able to do for yourself and even your family members in the future, or your family, your spouse or kids, is understand the religion. It's very empowering. And then you'll begin to love the Deen. Then you can spread the Deen. Then you get to appreciate what you have. You see? You don't appreciate what you got because you don't got it. Stop playing.
And that's a really good point. That reminds me of, if somebody will be a memorizer of Quran, and that would be something amazing in today's world.
No.
Wow, he's a hafidh of the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ's most amazing trait was not that he was a memorizer of the Quran, but that he was the Quran.
Walking Quran.
He was the walking Quran. That he applied the Quran. That was his best character. His akhlaq was the Quran. Not that he memorized. Right, that's not even mentioned.
That's
I think,
fact.
and it's not even given any priority. It was his manners and how he carried himself with the Quran. And this is a big issue in our community, because in the Somali community, memorization is given kind of like a priority. It's important that you memorize the Quran. I remember a story, somebody telling a story in Somalia. Highway robbers. They're sitting in the highway. They're waiting for people. This is after the war. They're robbing people. What they're doing between the robbings is suba'. They're going over the Quran. They're all memorizers of the Quran. Okay, hold on. There's a car coming. Let's rob this guy. They go back. Amma yatasa'alun. You're next. Go ahead. Right. So this just goes to show you, in our community, tazkiyah and applying and the application of the Quran was not really the main focus. Even back home, it was memorization, and you might survive in a Muslim country that way.
Yeah.
But when you live in the West,
It's not gonna hold up.
You're gonna be an atheist. Right? You could be an atheist and memorize. So subhanallah. So
the word hifdh itself, and understanding that its meanings a person's actually truly preservation of the Quran. What is preservation of the Quran? You know what that
actions
means?
as well.
Actions and spreading it, teaching it, applying it, living by it. All that stuff is part of the hifdh that we're talking about. All those hadith and those virtues that we talked about when it comes to hifdh, the Quran has this in mind. It's not just someone who's blah, 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 and then outside in the disco tomorrow. That doesn't make sense. That's not a true hafidh of the Quran. You know, that's not person standing. That's not Ahlul Quran. So a lot of that needs to be instilled in the people. Like, you memorize the Quran. It is just like the brother said, the hadith is going to be hujjah. It's going to be an interceder against you, Yawm al-Qiyamah, which is even worse. You'd rather have been a jahil, brother. Ignorant.
Why? Not knowing anything.
Not know nothing. Qul Allahu ahad, Allah, some few ayat of the Quran in your salah, that's it. But it's going to be against you. So this is a risk that people need to realize. Barakallahu
So, Fika Barak, this is a deep topic, and I think it was worth glossing over. last advices. What would you give advices to students? Because I think we need to focus a lot more on the students right now.
Yes.
Give advice to students who maybe they feel like, you know what, I'm in this Islamic institution place, and my parents want me to be here. I don't want to be here. You know, I don't feel like I need to be here because, you know, I can learn this stuff later on in my life. I don't need to do it right now.
As a student, as generally when you go in life, and I think everybody remembers this, there's a moment in life where you have to choose who you want to be, right?
That's
and
true.
you kind of remember that as you get older, you remember that moment vividly.
It's called a mawqif point of your life.
Right? Where you
that's
crossroads,
what
you know?
the crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens usually in the teenage years.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm about to get out of high school. I'm about to, you know, either I go to college or I can be this or I can be that. I could be in the gang life or I could be. So as a student, you're going to madrasa. When that time comes and you want to make that decision of either I take Islam seriously or I continue to just goof off, whatever decision you make, and it's all by actions. Now, if you decide on taking it seriously, you're gonna act on that way, and if you don't decide to take it seriously, you're gonna continue doing what you're gonna do. Every year that goes by, it's gonna be harder to get out of that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now, as you get older, you're gonna be deeper and deeper into that lifestyle, and this is how people become drug addicts and bums and so on and so forth.
Mm.
A lot of kids don't realize this, that one decision you made in your life that led up to all of this. So take Islam seriously, number one. Number two, respect it. There's a lot of people who were saved because of the respect they had for Islam. Allah guides those who maybe by habit they're doing stupid things and wasting their time, but they respect Islam. They respect the people of they respect the people of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not at that point where you are somebody of knowledge and somebody practicing, at least respect those who are practicing.
Yeah.
Every time you see people that are practicing, give them salams.
Honor them.
Honor them. Allah Azza wa Jal will guide you via that action. Those are the two advice I would give to students.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. That's a great point. My finishing advice would be similar, and I wanted to say, like, it may be at some point that you're learning this Islamic knowledge, but you're not valuing it, and that happens when you're a youngster and you lack wisdom, you're ignorant, and you don't really know what present or what purpose this kind of knowledge might have for you in the future. But if you take advantage of your years as a youth, and you take advantage, because I always have issues with certain adults, right? What do they tend to say? You know, let them live their lives, let them live, let them have fun. No one's saying don't let them have fun. No one's saying that. But think about it. You have 24 hours in a day, right? And if you're a youth and who's not married, who doesn't have family commitments, doesn't have all these other things, all your job is literally learning. For the most part, when the people who are in the West, anyone who's younger than 18, for the most part, their whole life is just predicated on school and fun.
Yeah.
So all you got to do is consistently give a percentage of, and this could go for those who are in their 20s as well. Consistently give a percentage of your time to seeking Islamic knowledge and take that seriously. And be like, okay, yeah, I'm dedicating X amount of hours for my education, my secular knowledge, or whatever degree you want to do. But at least, number one, like the brother said, respect Islamic knowledge, understand its importance, seek it with a pure intention, and who knows, somewhere down the line, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can place in your heart the ambition to take it further. And that can be a source of guidance for you in this world throughout your life and those around you, and come in your behalf and lead you to paradise. So do not underestimate the importance of Islamic knowledge. But all of that is great. But if you don't have akhlaq, you don't have an upbringing, you don't have like good characteristics as a human being, as a Muslim, you don't adapt the sunnah when it comes to your akhlaq, then don't bother seeking knowledge. You're going to cause more harm than good. If you don't have the proper intention, you're going to cause more harm than good. So let's clarify our intention, understand the value that Islam has for us as Muslims, and seeking Islamic knowledge, and what it's going to do for you in this world. Literally, it's going to open your eyes. And the Quran is hidayah and nur. Understanding that the Quran and what the Prophet ﷺ came with is guidance and light for you. It's literally going to guide you in a world full of darkness and shayateen and just straight evil. It's going to give you that light to guide you to the right path and to save those around you. But if you choose a path of ignorance, you're finished. So at the end of the day, the two evils that they're destroying everybody, we all know, comes from two things. It's coming from desires and ignorance. When you combine those two traits, that's your destruction.
Yeah.
You know, and shubuhat and shahawat.
Recipes of disaster.
Recipe of disaster, doubts and ignorance. If you combine the two, doubt, ignorance, and the following of shahawat, and it's over. It's over. So you have to be able to be like, hey, as a Muslim, I'm gonna be upon knowledge, I'm gonna be upon strength, and I'm gonna, put away my desires and be strong and be firm, and then you'll be successful. But if you don't have that formula, and the Islamic schools are key. The madaris are key to this, because there's nowhere else that's going to teach you this knowledge. No. So let's bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, as youth in general, change our approach when it comes to seeking Islamic knowledge. And bi'idhnillah, may Allah make us of those who are seek Islamic knowledge with a good intention and act upon it till the last day.
We'll just end it off here. I mean, it's... a lot of people they spend their lives chasing something that's a lie. It's a mirage. It's an illusion. And you find yourself in the whirlwinds of darkness and misguidance and just depression and agony and paranoia. All these people today that are representing the pop culture, that many kids are questioning or desiring to be in secret, to follow their footsteps. Just look at their lives. Look at the things that they're saying about their lives. They get locked up every 2 years. They say they don't trust any of their friends around them, but they keep all their friends around them. And they'll tell you even in their music, I don't trust any of these guys, but they're with me. Yeah. And so it's like, what you see, paranoia is total deception here. The money that you have easily goes into haram and sharab of khamr and all these things. Imagine this. Everybody that those individuals that they encourage to live that type of lifestyle, they will be burdened with their sin on the Day of Judgment. Look, how long are you going to live? Allah created us here for a purpose, and that purpose is to worship Him. How long are we going to live? How long are you going to have of living your life, your best life? How long is that going to be before you have to meet Him and face Him? And then what? So you threw away eternity of bliss and serenity for 20 years of depression, 20 years of desires, 20 years of illusions, 20 years of betrayal and deceit from people who said they loved you, 20 years of imprisonment, 20 years of lawyers and having to pay all these people in trouble with the law and having issues with your own family, and there's family issues. All of that for what? You see? So you're chasing a lie. And these are the footsteps of shaitan. That's why Allah says, فَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. He's leading you somewhere else. Right? He's leading you in a place where you can't get out of. And you'll keep walking down that hill until you can't come back up again. It's not worth it. And like the brothers mentioned, realistically, people end up as drug addicts, and some people don't make it out. Probably get killed, prison. And what does Allah want for you? He wants you to have a good family. He wants you to have a good wife or a good husband. and he wants you to eat good, and he wants you to live in a safe house where there's no drugs and bad influence. He wants you to have love between you and your siblings and to honor those relationships. All of this, we're going to give it up for lies and deceit? It's not worth it. Wallahi, it's not worth it. And you have to take it from the people who were in those lifestyles, and that Allah, He guided them out of those. Right? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu istajibu lillahi wa lirrasuli idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. Allah, He says, "O you who believe, obey Allah, follow, respond to the messenger alayhi salatu salam, when he's calling you to that which gives you life, and Islam gives you life. But if you turn away from this remembrance, then you will have ma'ishatan danka wa nahshuru al-yawm al-qiyamati a'ma, and you'll be raised on the day of judgment blind." It's not worth it to have eternity of blazing fire and humiliation in front of the entire creation because you want to have a good time. So obey Allah, fear Allah Azza wa Jal. Fear Allah, and these paths that you see and on social media and TikTok as being something good, these are all nothing but deception. The people that are in there are telling you it's a lie. They're telling you don't come in. What else do you want? You can't get a better warning sign than that. So let's end with that, inshallah ta'ala. This is a big topic. Brothers and sisters, grab hold of your deen. Learn your deen. You know, I think the more outlets that we have to learn, the harder it is to learn the religion. I think we have more avenue and access to learn your deen today, and people, way more than before, people are still not doing it. They'll tell you it's very difficult. Right? So, you know, and this is the real test. So we ask Allah to protect all of us. And, you know, Jazakumullah khairan for our guests, and you know, this conversation is going to continue, but we don't want to stop at conversations. Let's make some changes. Let's make some changes in our lives. Let's start with ourselves first. That's where it starts. The change starts here. And so, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to end off with that. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.